The prime directive is you don't tell them that. You don't suggest it. You don't do anything, because we don't want to contaminate that self-discovery. So if anything, the community has a built-in safeguard. We wouldn't want somebody to tell us, oh yeah, I think you might be trans, and then as we're trying to figure that out and maybe come to that conclusion, like, maybe I am trans, it's like, well, maybe that idea was just planted. So there's this fairly common thing going around in anti-trans circles saying that being trans is a cult, this gender ideology nonsense. Look, number one, there is no such thing as gender ideology. I know you think that, if people say, oh man, thinking that he can become a woman, that's gender ideology or whatever, vice versa. That's not even what we think to begin with. So you're already wrong. And let me know in the comments if you want me to explain that more. Let me use myself as an example. My brain intentionally kept me away from paying too much attention to trans people for pretty much my whole life. Like once, I was aware that trans people existed as early as like high school, barely, kind of, sort of. I didn't even really know what it was or anything. And then in like my mid to late 20s, when, there was a lot on Twitter and stuff, I was aware of, some controversies here and there, because I have a roommate who is, kind of into the politics of that and stuff, more on the anti-trans side in a way. So if anything, my influence was his effect, away from gender ideology. You would think that, if I'm trans, I got sucked into the cult. I was like, affected by social media and this and that. I wasn't paying attention to social media. In fact, I don't even like social media. I never have. I barely even knew what being trans was, and my brain actually, in order to protect itself, part of my repression that I've had, or that I had from about the age of like 5 to 35, when I actually woke up and finally accepted it after fighting it for so long. Big part of that repression was keeping my conscious focus away from certain things. I would start getting cognitive dissonance and feeling really uncomfortable. So when I heard about trans people, or when I saw some controversy about trans people, my brain would kind of tune out and try to like distract me and move my attention away. I came to the conclusion of being trans after almost a decade of actively trying not to be. Right? I started waking up when I was about 27, 28, and I went through the shame purge cycle over and over and over again. I went through living hell thinking like, oh, I'm mentally ill. Oh, I think I fixed it. I pushed it down. Oh no, it came back against my will, blah, blah, blah. Practically zero outside influence this entire time. I found creators like Samantha Lux and unfortunately Blair White, and it was more when when it would come back up and I would be experimenting with things and whatever, I might watch some content from a couple creators here and there, and then I would feel really ashamed and disgusted, sell all the stuff that I had bought, and then completely not pay any attention to trans stuff at all. So I had like a little influence. It's practically zero. It was only in those moments when I was actually like, it was trying to come out. It was, that part of me was trying to wake up and be acknowledged. But there was certainly no one online or in real life trying to get me into a cult or anything, or even trying to like convince me I was trans or get me to try to be trans or something like this, because it's not a choice to begin with. And even if it were, that wouldn't matter. But to this very day, 2 years into transition, I still don't know any trans people in real life, which is kind of sad. I want to meet some trans people. With where I live now, I could probably more or less easily meet them, but I'm also very introverted and this and that and whatever. And when I occasionally see a trans person out in the wild, I usually don't really say anything. The only IRL trans person I kind of know is a friend of a friend who's non-binary that I met like twice. So if I'm in a cult, I must have accidentally joined by osmosis or through like the collective subconscious or something. Like, come on, you have to be serious. Like, I want somebody to leave a comment explaining how, given my context, my situation, how did I get pulled into a cult? How is this a cult rather than something that was naturally, spontaneously within myself, trying to come out after being repressed for so long? Besides, at the end of the day, the number one most important thing that a lot of these anti-trans people don't understand, these transphobes, is the prime directive. The trans community has something called the prime directive, which sounds culty or whatever, but it's the golden rule within the community. And that is that if you see somebody Like if you're trans and you see somebody and they're showing signs that they might be trans, the prime directive is you don't tell them that. You don't suggest it. You don't do anything, because we don't want to contaminate that self-discovery. So if anything, the community has a built-in safeguard, and not all trans people are necessarily aware of this, or like we don't have a hive mind, or honor that. But the vast majority of us, you ask most people in the community, most of us will tell you, yes, we follow the prime directive, because we wouldn't want somebody to tell us, oh yeah, I think you might be trans, and then as we're trying to figure that out and maybe come to that conclusion, like, maybe I am trans, it's like, well, maybe that idea was just planted, right? Like we already have a hard enough time accepting ourselves and digging ourselves out of all this internalized transphobia, and then being brave enough to tell the world who we are and risk friends, family, career, even our lives, just for a chance to not live in a constant living hell, or not live at all. We don't want to mess that up for somebody else. Now, if somebody is questioning and they know a trans person, like if I had a friend who was questioning, they came to me and they're like, hey, I'm kind of wondering, then that's a little different, because then they're asking advice. And even then, again, you look online, if you actually go in trans spaces, most trans people will tell you, hey, like the common phrase is, only you can know that. Nobody can tell you that. You have to figure that out for yourself. But, we'll follow that up with like, this is my experience, XYZ, like if they want to know that. So we're willing to help people who might be eggs, as we call them, to be able to accept themselves. But if anything, the process isn't trying to get people into a cult. It's actually trying to protect people from accidentally thinking that they're trans or anything. It's like we have like an anti-mechanism that tries not to, I don't want to say brainwash, because we don't try to brainwash people, but it's like it's very anti-brainwash. It's very anti-cult. It's like the opposite, like as far as you can get from a cult. These anti-trans organizations and individuals, they're so convinced that being trans isn't real, it can't be real, it's not natural. They have to come up with explanations for why there's suddenly so many trans people, when there's perfectly easy ways to explain that. Number one, there's been greater societal acceptance of LGBTQ people in general. The last couple of years we've been living through some fascist backlash. That'll pass. We will survive either way, even if they, get rid of all of us. We're natural. We're naturally occurring. You can't get rid of us all forever. It's a fight you won't win. But even that aside, there's something called the left-handedness graph, right? Back in the day, for religious reasons, it was seen, if you were left-handed, that was like the devil's influence. So, people would be like literally like beaten or whatever to get them to use their right hand. So people would learn how to write with their right, even if they were left-hand dominant. Well, over time, as society became more secular, all of a sudden, the number of people identifying, identity doesn't mean what you think it does. The number of people identifying or saying, hey, I'm left-handed, went from like 2% to like 6% in a very short period, relatively speaking. It was like over the course of a couple decades. It just shot up. It's a huge percentage increase. And it's not that there were suddenly more left-handed people all of a sudden. That they didn't just magically appear because, Christianity's dominance or influence on society was waning and now the devil was winning. No, think about it. If you were like a priest or a pastor during that time, you might be thinking, this rise in left-handed people. I heard this in the news the other day. It's the devil's influence. We got to keep fighting this war. Like, come on, it's fucking nonsense. It's exactly the same thing. I mean, exactly. No different in any way. It is exactly the same thing. The reason why we're seeing the number of trans people, people identifying as trans, rise, as well as the number of LGBTQ people in general rise, you can look at this Gallup poll, is because society finally has been more accepting and more tolerant of our existence. And plus you have the internet and stuff, which they're trying to control now, as they have been for a long time, where we can actually find resources and find terms and learn about ourselves. One of the reasons why it took me so long to realize I was trans is because, especially as a kid and as a teenager growing up in the 90s and early 2000s, I didn't know gender dysphoria. I didn't have the concepts of any of that. And if I had, things probably would have made a lot more sense. So it's not a cult. We're just natural people, but you guys can't wrap your heads around that. You have to try to find some way to explain it, even though all of your theories have been constantly debunked over and over again. Social contagion, autogynephilia, cult. It's all a bunch of nonsense. Like, we exist. I'm sorry that you don't like that, but we exist. And science underpins this. I know you all don't want to believe that. You can check my link tree. I have lots of really great go-to starter resources that will show you the evidence is very, very clear that we exist. We've tried for decades, over a century, to cure and fix trans people. Everything has been tried. The only thing that works is the gender affirming care, because we are naturally occurring. We have always existed. Plus, it is insanely infantilizing. Women get infantilized, trans people get infantilized, gay people get infantilized, because there's this dominant narrative, this sort of cis-centric, cis-normative, heteronormative view, this patriarchal view, which is itself a bunch of social constructs. Can't have society without a social construct. It's a bunch of nonsense. It excludes the very lived reality of a bunch of us, and then you say, oh, well, you're just in a cult. Millions of people are just in a cult because there's millions of trans people in the world, believe it or not. There's so many people in the world that, yeah, there's millions of us. We're still only between 1% and 3% of the population approximately. For people to say oh, you're confused, you're brainwashed, you're whatever, fuck you. Shout out to the Yap Podcast. This video was actually inspired by their most recent video that just came out, which I will link in the description if you want to follow up from there. Keep rising and shine your light. The world needs you.